What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 144 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight we're talking UFC 291, the BMF belt on the line for the second time between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier as they fight for the second time. As usual with the pay-per-view, we brought in a guest. I've been trying to get him to come on for a couple of these last few pay-per-views. Finally had some availability, especially with the late notice call. We got Tim Troiano with us at Timothy_Troiano. Tim, how are you doing today, buddy?
Doing awesome. Can't wait to chop it up with you guys and break down, get some good bets on this card.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you here. It's going to be a fun one to talk about. A lot of entertaining fights. Obviously, we have Lags. Danny_Lags. Danny, how's it going today?
Good. Should be a great card. And Tim, love the South Carolina hat. Love it.
Go Cox. And then me, John, at MMA Fox. We'll skip over the recap of last week. Danny and I will run it next week since there's three of us here. And yeah, we'll jump right in here. First fight of the night, Miranda Maverick, Priscilla Cachoeira. Current line, we got Maverick minus 270, comeback Cachoeira plus 230. Tim, I'll start with you here. Any thoughts? Anywhere, props, money lines, anything? What do you got?
I mean, yeah, I think this is a kind of a smash spot, get right spot for Miranda after taking the L to Jasmine. Jasmine was kind of like the worst matchup in hindsight, and or to some people that bet Jasmine in pre-sight too. Also, not hindsight; it was hindsight to me. But yeah, Maverick is. I mean, she's kind of the kryptonite for Priscilla. She's going to go for wrestling. It's kind of like the fight with Jillian is so similar to Miranda, but Miranda's just like kind of better at everything compared to Jillian on like just every level. And that's just where I just don't see a lot of paths minus just a KO major, like bonk KO. Because anytime, I mean, like Miranda's durable too. So she can strike well enough to get into a position to clinch and then get her takedowns. And then she's elite at back takes. And that's just, again, these are the things that Priscilla does really, really poorly with takedown defense. She wings such huge shots that she's going to be there to be, hit kind of like last week with Molly, that she just overcommits. So these takedowns are going to be there. So it's just a bunch of things that just scream like, early, probably round 1, round 2 sub for Maverick here.
Yeah, agree. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, don't really disagree. As somebody before who used to play unders in Maverick fights like I did in the Shanna Young fight, pretty much like the same price. I'm just really not trying to flip that coin again. I understand like why you would be looking to bet unders and the fight doesn't go here. I get it. But I'm just, price isn't there for me, and I'm just not trying to, again, flip that coin. I think she dominates, but just a question of whether or not she finishes.
Yeah, I've considered playing Maverick, honestly, on the money line and obviously on the submission line here. I mean, I hate laying women's turbo juice, and obviously, Maverick is not quite what we thought she was, or what many people thought she was. But at the same time, it's like she was a bigger favorite against Sabina Mazo and a much bigger favorite against Shanna Young. I mean, both of whom I'd make favorites against Priscilla, to be quite frank. And yeah, I mean, maybe Priscilla is a bit better on bottom than Shanna Young is, but she's still one of the worst grapplers in, the UFC. And it's like, if you're going to lay this kind of juice, you're looking for someone who is going to attempt a lot of takedowns and looking to fade someone who cannot stop those takedowns. And I more or less think that's what we have here. Even standing, I'd give Maverick an edge. Like, to me, at Catch's current line, 30% implied, it's like, you got to be putting her KO like over 20% in a women's fight there. And like, I know she's got a number of KOs in the UFC, but it's like, she knocked out Shanna Dobson. Who cares? Gina Mazzani, who's horrible, was absolutely mauling her and gassed out. And then it's like she just blitzed Lipsky. Like, I feel like it's very difficult to put her KO north of like 10%, especially given how much Maverick shoots. And if that's the case, like I think you got to be looking at Maverick -4, -500. Haven't decided if I'll play it, but I'm with Tim. I think sub 1-2, it's like, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, I don't know if you've bet it, but I see like +575, +750. I think those are both like interesting targets. Is that kind of like what you're looking at here?
Totally. Yeah, it's similar to like there's a couple fights later on that I've got some eyes on like sub props and inside the distance props, and like, yeah, it's kind of you can't get greedy, and there's just that seems like a line that just is based on like what Lags was saying, that she didn't finish Young and she hasn't finished these other fighters. So I think they've kind of forgotten a little bit that this is actually what she does best.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, Lags, I'll kick it to you. Matt Semmelsberger, Uros Medic. We've had a lot of line movement on this fight this week.
Yeah.
Semmelsberger, he popped out all the way to like minus 230 at one point, and now he's back to minus 200. Come back on Medic plus 170. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I understand the line movement from like a little bit of perspective because like Medic moving up a weight class, short notice, not defensively sound, isn't a great defensive wrestler, cardio not the best. I think Semmelsberger, like, with all that on the table, like, should be an easy spot. But, like, Semmelsberger's not the highest level caliber himself. Like, he just seems like a brute, big power, doesn't really wrestle a ton. So I'd rather target an under 2.5 if it's playable in DK when they drop that. But other than that, it's a pass for me.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly. Like, Medic is one of these guys I successfully faded him with Jalen Turner, but I'd been trying to fade him prior to that. He's one of these Alaska FC guys who's probably better than I initially thought he was. Obviously, he was for 55. He was large, very long, and explosive. But him moving up, I don't think is necessarily the best thing for him. The guy doesn't have great defense standing, pretty poor grappling defense. Like, I don't think Semi's anything special at all, but he's actually bigger than Medic is, and Medic has never been in a fight where he's not the bigger man. And so I don't know how he's going to look coming up. I know he's coming off a hand injury. I think if Semmelsberger wants to, he can probably wrestle here. I don't feel confident about it, though. At minus 200, like, Semmelsberger's just not a guy I'm willing to lay minus 200 on. I don't even see, even the under, it's a 1.5. So it's like, it's hard for me to get too excited about it. Tim, you have any angle on this fight here?
No, this is just I think that, like, I agree with Lags. I think that the line movement is justified. Like, people that are looking at what it was at minus 140 or minus whatever around there are looking at the exact same things and then saying elevation, all the cues are saying, like, plus you have like you said, Semmelsberger is, like, for a guy that's a size bully in Medic, he's not going to be a size bully here. And Matt's, like, pretty big for the division in general himself. So I feel like Matt's kryptonite has been guys that can really grapple him. He doesn't have to worry about that. So all of those things are pointed in that direction. But at the same time, it's like, dude, Medic he's just, like, goes for broke. He fights, like, really, really hard. He's not afraid to fight. He's not afraid to, like, put his chips in the table, if you will. And I just think, like, that for Semmelsberger, just in general, like, I was on Morono versus Semmelsberger. I was on Fletcher versus Semmelsberger. There's, like, a lot of fighters where I bet against Semmelsberger. So I'm not really, like, huge on him, but it's always guys that can grapple. So I think if you're giving me Semmelsberger at this line, I don't think it's playable. But if you got in it early in the week, that's good for you. Those are good lines. And I kind of think that Semmelsberger cracks him and eventually kills him. But I just think I don't know when it'll happen. I think it probably happens honestly, it could happen in round 1 and round 2 would be my guess. I don't think it gets to round 3.
Yeah, I broadly agree with that. Moving on, we got Carlos Vergara. He's taking on Vinicius Salvador. Line here, Vergara minus 144, comeback on Salvador plus 124. It's kind of interesting because, like, my initial read when before I looked at the fight was Salvador at, like, plus 150. I thought it was a decent spot. But the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of starting to lean the other way. I don't know if I'll get there. I'm making a bet at Vergara minus 144, but Salvador's interesting because he's big for the weight class and he obviously throws heat. Two things that you kind of want to see, and he's taking on a guy in Vergara who has been outstruck in his career in the UFC. He gives up a lot of volume and he's not very defensively sound. So, like, on its face, Salvador's a guy you'd want to back theoretically. The problem for me is I don't think Salvador's got very good cardio. He's taking on a guy in Vergara who is literally a cardio and durability bully, like a guy who's just going to come forward, walk through the fire, and just give it back. And is going to usually have his best rounds in the second and third round, where Salvador is usually starting to fade. And then, like, you compound that and you put it at elevation, and that's really concerning for me. Like, I'm expecting Salvador to get off to a good start in this fight, but we've seen his cardio flag at Vegas plenty of times, at pace, but nothing that we're not going to see from Vergara here. And now they're at elevation. And on top of which, it's one of those things where Vergara's never attempted a takedown in the UFC, but I shouldn't say I have this feeling he's going to attempt a takedown. If there is a scramble or Salvador shoots a takedown while he's tired and Vergara gets the top position here, I think he's going to absolutely smash him. Like Salvador on bottom looks really bad to me. And I actually think, you look at what Vergara did to De Silva on top. You can say, oh, well, De Silva was gassed out. But then you look at what he did to Clayton in top position. Like Clayton's a decent grappler. I think if Vergara gets the top position here, he's going to hurt Salvador pretty bad. I just think there's a lot of edges on the Vergara side that I didn't initially think about. I lean that side. If it keeps coming in, I might make a play pre. But ultimately, I think you could make an argument for betting Salvador pre and looking to bail live into Vergara. What are your thoughts here, Tim?
Yeah, I'm not big on Salvador at all. I mean, I think his win against Shannon Ross is against Shannon Ross, and we know now what that is, what that means. I also think Salvador is going to throw out. I've seen in 3 fights that he throws out a fake soccer kick, ankle kick against dudes.
Rabona kick. Yep.
Yeah, I just feel like, man, that's it's minus EV long term, guys. That's a move you're not going to want to be supporting.
Do we even know what that is? Like, does that even hurt?
Yes.
I feel like it can't.
No,
right?
No, it's a Rabona kick. You're literally you're taking your. So depending on what stance you're in, but you're taking your right leg, you're going around your left leg behind it and just kicking it. So there's no way you can generate any kind of power.
Yeah, you're faking kicking the soccer ball to your teammate on the right and then passing it to the guy on the left. And like it's a fake move in soccer, and he gets it's just terrible. So he does throw that. So if you see that kick, it's he's trying to do something with it. He's obviously got the hair of the Brazilian soccer player too. So this dude obviously wants to just play soccer in the ring. That being said, I think that, like you said, my eyebrows rose up when you said that I think that Vergara might attempt his first takedown here, because I agree, man. Like I think like Vergara's the guy that. I found the stat amazing. I was listening on Stat Diggers, and Weezy said like he's 0 takedowns attempted and 50% control time 4, which is like
that's crazy.
That's fucking insanity. That's insanity that a guy that has 0 takedowns attempt can control the other people that are doing it and attempting all these takedowns against him and reverse them and do whatever and like get it. Like, so to me, it's like, obviously he's stupid as shit because he can do that and he doesn't like go for takedowns. So that's always bad. But to me, it's like if Salvador does connect on him at any point, it's like it has to be in his mind that like Altamirano was close to getting positions on this guy and like close to getting takedowns on this guy. Like, I just feel like it'll be there. So, and like you said, if he does get him down to the ground at any point, I feel like he mauls him on the ground. So, Vergara's the side for me, just from the fact that you have cardio, you have durability. I just think that Salvador is just in like a round 1, early round 2 or bust here, KO. And if he doesn't get it, I just think eventually Vergara either just outpoints him and just like that, just outpoints him, or maybe he connects with something. I think it'll be hard for him to get in on him unless Salvador is really tired in the end of the fight, because he's just so much smaller than him.
Yeah, agreed. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll round up the trio here on CJ as well. Kind of like what you touched on, John, is where I came out to it. It's just the cardio and chin bully for CJ. And I think even though these guys are both pretty low level, I think that's enough to push him through this fight, get a late finish, potentially a decision as well. And again, Tim brought up the points I wanted to as well with the Rabona kick. And he also done sliding low kicks too. Just like low IQ shit in the ring. I think this guy's super hittable. Gas tank not great. It should be a good fight for CJ, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I'm happy my 2 fake sports experts could give me tell me about
Hey, speaking of which, we have a USA women's soccer game after this tonight.
Everybody that's watching is riveted right now.
Facts. Hey, listen, it's a big game for the group to win the group here. All right.
Anyway, moving on. We got Jake Matthews taking on Darius Flowers. Jake Matthews currently minus 255. Comeback on Darius Flowers plus 215. Jake Matthews was the scene of one of the best Lambo plays, live spaces, live bets of the year earlier this year against him with Matthew Semmelsberger. Tim, do you think we'll get a similar performance out of Darius Flowers that we saw from Matthew Semmelsberger?
Oof. I mean, we might. I mean, we might. I mean, I don't know. I don't think. You know what? I honestly don't.
I love the confidence, Tim.
I don't know on this fight, man. I just think that we look at Jake Matthews, and he's just historically a guy that the market has no fucking clue about, and they just overcorrect on him back and forth, just different ways. I feel like this card has a lot of great live bet spots. I just feel like there's a bunch of guys that are just super, super front loaded versus guys that have the cardio edge as well as like finishing upside late in fights where they usually do that anyways. And they're usually resilient. Like Jake Matthews, the problem for me in this fight is I'll ask you guys, like, how good a wrestler do you think Jake Matthews is offensively and defensively?
I think he's
all
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, nothing special, but
yeah. So it's to me, it's like early. I feel like him getting the fight to the ground and kind of like keeping things safe or getting Flowers. Like Flowers is a big kind of stocky wrestle boxer. And I just think that early he'll probably be able to maybe get a takedown or like, wing a shot and maybe connect a shot. But just I'm not really big on Flowers and I'm not huge on Matthews either. Especially against guys that can either crack or can wrestle. And it's like the problem is the cardio for Flowers. Obviously, his cardio is just dog shit. So it's another one of those spots where it's like, why bet minus 300 or why, take shots on things like that. I would think that it's going to be like a late round kind of finish for Matthews. But I mean, it's going to also take, like, if it's late round, it's going to take like a panic shot or something like that. I just don't know that he's going to ever be necessarily easy to get a takedown on Flowers. And I might be way wrong on that, but like, I just don't know that it's going to be like, oh yeah, he's going to take him down and sub him. I'd be really confident in that. It's just, I don't know that he's going to be able to do that. So he might outpoint him and maybe he gets like a late round KO or something like that. But I just think that the cardio is so bad that it's a live bet spot. And as soon as you start to see the wheels fall off, you start to see where the line's at and then attack them. There's no reason to bet pre on Matthews.
Alex, what do you think?
I'll say to that point, I don't know if it's not. I'm not going to say it's not better to wait live, but I feel like you might miss that chance betting live because I just think Flowers in general is operating at a pretty low level. I don't think he's very good. I think he's super hittable. I feel like his wrestling isn't that good either. He's just more or less bullying guys early. Again, could land a big hook, could knock Matthews out early, but longer this fight goes, I favor Matthews in a big way. I think it should be a good fight for Matthews. I think the line's probably fine-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, Chris Ayala asked what odds did we get on live spaces on Semi. If I'm not mistaken, it was like plus 200 after a round and like plus 125 after two with him clearly up 2 rounds. Those were some fun times. With regard to this fight, yeah, Tim, I think like you did, like the thing is with Matthews wrestling, I don't think he's a bad wrestler, but he's not one of these guys that like if you stuff his initial attempt, he's gonna like switch to a single or look to like use his weight and maneuver you on the fence. Like he has no chain wrestling. It's basically double leg. If it works, great. If it doesn't, okay, we're back in space. So not ideal. And like I kind of agree, Flowers could potentially have some success stuffing him early. I mean, with that said, it's weird because like I look at the fight, I feel like Darius Flowers does not to me seem like outside of just sheer hardware, like he's cut out for the UFC. And Jake Matthews, I think. He's a skilled fighter. I shouldn't even say reasonably skilled. He's a skilled fighter who probably has like in the aggregate, he has like a top 15 skill set, but he's the classic less than the sum of his parts. Like Jake Matthews he never puts it together. Like this guy a couple years ago went out there and had an amazing performance against Li Jingliang and everybody was like, oh, he's turning it around. Then he comes out, completely collapses against Anthony Martin in round 3, puts up a meh performance against Rostam Akman, fights Emil Weber-Meek, and again, almost collapses in round 3 of that fight. It's just like, and then, fights Matthew Semmelsberger last fight after his best performance of his career against Andre Fiallo. And he has a very clear grappling edge in that fight and just doesn't go to it, gets wobbled twice in rounds 1 and 2, finally gets on top of him and rides him out in round 3. But it's just like, this guy, you just cannot trust Jake Matthews to make good decisions in a UFC octagon. Even on the feet, I don't think he's a bad striker, but he won't pull the trigger, Like for what the Fiallo fight was crazy because like I bet him against Fiallo thinking he's going to come out and wrestle fuck Fiallo pretty easily. And instead, like he owned him, but he owned him standing and banging in the pockets, like the exact opposite of what he should have done in that fight. But yeah, I just, yeah, like Tim said, it's like, yeah, I think there's a good live spot on Matthews here if Flowers has success early, but like going in early, it's like, yeah, if your case is Jake Matthews has a huge grappling edge in this fight, he should dominate. I agree with you. But my counter to that is, do you really think Jake Matthews is going to come out and shoot 10 takedowns here? because I'm not that confident. If I was, like, I would be advocating for the minus 250 because I think if that was the case, he could dominate. It's just I'm at the point where, to me, unless you're getting like a decent dog spot on Matthews, it's impossible to really trust this guy, especially a juice. So I lean him. I think, like Tim said, it's like if you want to take a shot at sub, I don't think it's bad. But like I'd rather wait, just enter Matthews live. Like I don't really want to trust this guy to have to think in the cage early in this fight. Like let me wait till I know Flowers' horsepower has declined by like 50%. So yeah, it's a pass for me. Moving on. Weird fight here. We got Roman Kopylov minus 200 taking on Claudio Ribeiro plus 170. Lags, any strong takes here?
Not really, but and not to like try to simplify it, but I feel like this is a little bit of an easier fight than his last fight with Puna. Like I feel like Ribeiro's much bigger of a gasser, much more hittable than Puna, much more easier to wrestle if Kopylov went to that route. I feel like he can keep the range here, has good kicks, has a good jab. I think a Kopylov late finish is probably here on the cards. But yeah, no bettable angles for me, I think.
Yeah, it's weird. I sort of lean the Ribeiro side just because I mean, I agree with you. Like if you want to ask me who's the more skilled fighter, I think Claudio Ribeiro is like one of like the least skilled fighters in the division, but he hits very hard and he's very explosive early. And I was moderately impressed that he was able to counter grapple against Joseph Holmes in his last fight. So I don't really think much grappling happens here. Look, Kopylov should outstrike him on the feet fairly handily. But at the same time, I don't trust Kopylov to not get hit. If they do tie up and Kopylov ends up on bottom, he's like one of the worst bottom fighters in the UFC. It's not something I want to get in front of at minus 200. I think you could make a case that Ribeiro early KO equity alone probably justifies the price. But at the same time, I faded Ribeiro big in his debut. He's a guy that I'm more or less looking to fade. He's not a guy I'm trying to bet. So I don't know if I'll bet. If it blew out to like plus 230, I'd probably take a shot, but I'm okay passing it. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think that Lags, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that this guy's like a Walmart version of Puna, like just the same exact style and like just doesn't do things nearly as well, doesn't have the same power, fights orthodox. So like you have different like advantages. Kopilov's been another one of those guys where I think that the market's just been way off on him. And I just think that this is now where it's either like, maybe it's overcorrected. I don't know. We'll see. But they've been way off. So Kopylov is like, just like you said, John, he's a significantly better striker. He's cleaner. He's going to have way more combinations that have process to them. Claudio's kind of like bonk or like moment winning. Like he has to win big moments in rounds to win a decision or knock him out. And I think Kopylov has shown to be like very durable and can take shots. He almost got murdered by Duraev on the ground, kind of to show your point. Like he still stayed there and he was able to. Got
subbed by Carl Roberson.
That was awful. That's where I think that everybody messed up. I mean, including myself. Like I just felt like that not only like messed up the matrix for me on Kopilov's like rating, but also on Roberson. That you're like, oh my god, like Roberson can do that, and you're like, no, Roberson's fucking terrible. Don't let him. He's the worst. He's gonna get out grappled by everybody. So yeah, I agree.
I remember I parlayed Duraev literally because of seeing that graphic path of Carl.
Yeah, I thought in that, like, I just think like that kind of fight, if you have somebody that is going to grapple and has good wrestling and has good cardio, maybe okay, I think it's a good shot. But I don't disagree that the line might be a little bit wide. It might be stretching out to be wide now and might be an overcorrection on Kopylov. But I just think he's better striking. I think he's defensively responsible and durable. He's got cardio edge. He could cage push kind of like Abdul did as well to tire him out. I mean, realistically, this dude got finished after he was cage pushed and kicking Abdul's leg. And then Abdul's like, fuck this. I'm just going to cage push you for the end of like the last minute and a half, 2 minutes of this round. And he was death gassed just from the cage push. So I really feel like elevation, moving around like that. I just got the same thing. I just feel like late round, I agree with the Lags. I think late round props and, or decision for Kopylov are pretty, good bets.
I feel like this fight, like in general, reminds me a lot of the last fight we were just talking about with Matthews.
Yep.
Sorry about that, guys. Can you hear some dinosaurs screaming in the background of my mic right now? Okay. I just heard my son turn on
No,
dinosaurs in the
I
other room.
I
I
didn't.
was like,
But yeah, in terms of like the money lines and stuff, I feel like we were talking about that, like, oh, maybe we are like, oh, they're overcorrected, maybe not, this and that, live bets, this and that. So I just feel like with these two cardio guys, or the cardio dynamic, I should say, with these guys.
There's a lot. I mean, I think that I agree. I think there's a lot of that in this whole card. I think there's a lot of guys that you're like, man, this dude's front loaded. This guy's durable, cardio edge, gotta last through round one. Good live bets. I think there's a few really good spots.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, we got Derek Lewis taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Current line, we got de Lima minus 230, comeback on Lewis plus 195. Candidly, for like most of like the last couple years, these are like really the kind of spots I'm looking to target on the Lewis side. Like a guy who's been fighting at the top of the division, 1-4 in his last 5, taking a theoretical step down. But not here, honestly. I spent the last couple weeks loading up on early de Lima prices, and obviously the Lewis price got smoked once it went. I don't think there's any meat on the bone on the de Lima side at minus 230. I guess I'll just try to make the case why I don't think you should bet Derek Lewis here. I think Lewis is completely shot, to be quite honest, and you can look and say, yeah, he lost to Cyril Gahn. I can forgive that. Knocked out Chris Daukaus. I mean, I bet him against Daukaus. But his last couple fights, man, like Tuivasa, he comes out there, looks stiff on the feet, tries to grapple him, has a bit of success, and then immediately gasses out and dies. Comes out with Pavlovich, immediately knocked out. Can forgive that. But then you look at the Spivak fight. Like, historically, guys who have tried to tie up with Lewis in the clinch have had a tough time there. And usually he can just stand up and, like, disengage. And he did stand up early in that fight. But he couldn't do it. There were rumors he had a bad back injury. He couldn't do anything to get Spivak off him. It was literally just takedown, get up, takedown, get up, takedown, quit. And, the bottom line is the guy's very old. He has never had the best process for heavyweight ever. His durability, you can see at this point, it's clearly gone. He can't grapple. He's always been reliant on the Hail Mary, but like seeing his last couple performances, even the Gahn fight, look, it's gone, sure. But like this guy, the speed just looks gone. He's got a bad back and he's old. And the speed just looks gone to me. To me, he looks like a man who's collecting checks. I've heard rumors that he could be retiring after this fight. And I don't blame him. The guy gets paid $200K to show. Like, no, I don't think anybody blames him for showing up to collect a check here. But I think he's pretty much done in the UFC. And he's taken on Marcos de Lima, who, while the same age, de Lima's fought on the best run he's ever been on in his career. Yeah, he's fighting lower levels of competition, but you just look at these guys skill for skill, and it's like, Lima's way faster than Lewis is. He's way more durable. Like most of the guys who finished Lima have been on the mat. No one's KO'd him. He doesn't get dropped ever. He can take a shot. He throws heavy, heavy leg kicks. Lewis can't take a leg kick. He can grapple really well for heavyweight. We've seen it recently. Lewis really can't grapple at all anymore. I just look at it and I feel they're on different trajectories. Lima, I don't think he's coming for the title or anything like that, but Lima to me is clearly a top 10 heavyweight. Well, at this point, I look at Derek Lewis and I feel like he's a guy that's still holding out for the big knockout shot. And I mean, sure, he could land that here, but even if you tell me they come out and just bang it out in the center, I think the much faster, much more durable guy is probably going to knock out the fragile guy at a pretty high clip here. I think when you've looked at Lewis recently, guys who haven't just engaged him in the pocket and just stayed on the outside and kicked him have just destroyed him. Lima obviously has that available to him. And then you look at the grappling, and Lima can easily get this guy down if he wants and probably sub him pretty easily if he wants here. I think Lewis's time is come and gone. I think Lima's got edges everywhere here. Again, not normally a bet I like to make, but I think Derek Lewis's swan song has happened here. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I feel like if you bet like Derek Lewis historically, and you're betting him against grapplers, and that's the way to go. And I think that de Lima's weakness, like you said, is guys that can grapple well enough that he can't get him down, and then can grapple him and tire him out, and then eventually sub him and exploit his cardio weakness. There's just nothing that shows that Lewis is going to exploit. I mean, I know that there is cardio weakness on de Lima. I just think it's equally as bad on Lewis. And I just, like you said, the durability on de Lima is very good. And he's been in there with guys who can crack, and he's only been knocked out once. I think it was in 2012. So I don't know, man. He probably does finish Lewis in the first round. maybe second round, but probably very high likeliness that it's in the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if he drops him with a few of the leg kicks, and then maybe like goes down to the ground and like subs him or ground and pounds him. But it's just it really, like, the leg kicks are going to be such a huge issue. It's like he's just going to be taking a log and like throwing it right directly at his leg. So I just feel like that's going to be a major issue for Lewis. And Lewis, like you said, he's not fighting for your money anymore. He's just not taking. He's not taking anything. It's not. This is not Euros Medic here, where he's gonna. He'll die in his shield for you. Go ahead, put it on the plus 200. You'll take your shot. Like I think you got one guy that will do that, and I think one guy that's just looking to get out and get his money, like you said.
Yeah, you know what's interesting with that in mind? Something I was thinking about here. So, like, I brought up the Spivak fight, and like, if you go back a couple years ago, Alexei Olenek took this guy down early and had a lot of success early. But Lewis was constantly fighting in that fight. And in round two, Lewis fucked him up. It just was a different guy watching him in that fight versus watching the guy who showed up to fight Spivak. Like, you watch those two fights, and the guy who fought Latifi and Olenek, who was coming back and exploding to his feet and exploding at them. I mean, all the explosion's gone, in my opinion. So, what do you think, Lags? Do you agree with us?
And that's a geriatric Olenek at that point too, anyways.
Yeah, that's
I don't think. I don't think. And we bet him too. Yeah, I know. Plus 220. Rip. Going for the Scarfold. I don't think there's much to add. I know. I don't think there's much to add. I mean, De Lima, big leg kicks, massive grappling upside. I know people are trying to poke holes in the cardio, but like you touched on, Tim, Lewis's cardio is equally as bad. So like, there's not much of an edge there at all. I think Lima fucks him up, and it's probably early. Funny enough, BetOnline actually opened the under 1.5 at like plus 125, and obviously we've seen that steam out to minus 200.
I think this comment from Kaiser is the best thing I've ever seen. A tow truck driver who drank beers and trained a couple hours a week, fought for the belt twice, beat Ngannou, and has records in the company. It really is amazing. Derek Lewis is a treasure, but the treasure dies this week. It's going to Davy Jones' locker, as they say. Moving on, though. Trevin Giles, Gabriel Bonfim. Tim, tell me about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Bonfim fucks him up here pretty bad. Officer Trevin Giles is a guy that I've actually made some money on him in a couple of his last fights. I really don't like betting on the guy historically. Just is not like a smart fighter and just can basically lose every which way. Doesn't have good cardio. So I kind of think that like Bonfim really has him covered here everywhere. Especially if he gets him down to the ground. He's a very solid Gabriel's a solid like all around fighter, but when it comes to like striking, he'll get these guys, like a lot of his subs are like, it's kind of similar to Joel Alvarez last week, where it's like he'll strike with these guys, but it's different. Like he's not like wild like Alvarez is, but he hurts guys on the feet and he gets them to panic, and then they instant like shoot, and then he subs them. So it's like it's different how they get it done. That Alvarez is way more wild and like causes chaos and makes you do that. And Bonfim just kind of like just has this method of just like piecing the shit out of you, and like you're going, oh, this isn't gonna work. Like I just like another jab, another shot, big shot. Okay, I have to go, and then panic, and then he'll choke you out. So I kind of think that that's what happens in round one or round two here. That he probably gets like a panic shot or even like a KO, like a bonks him, but probably like a club and sub in homage to the podcast.
What do you think, Lags?
Yeah, I'll echo Tim here as well. I feel like Bonfim's going to be much faster than Giles on the feet, probably going to finish him at some point. Giles, not the most durable guy, like Tim alluded to, not the best cardio either. I think Bonfim finds a finish here, but there's not much of a playable angle unless you want to play the under 1.5, but pass on that.
Well, I bet Officer Trevin Giles because I have several
Dog Hunter John. All right.
My passions are my family, making money, and losing money on Trevin Giles. Look, I don't disagree with any of you guys about Bonfim. It's funny taping him. I think he's a good prospect. I even agree with him being favored in this fight. You know, he's got really fast hands, obviously. The dude can crack. If you stick your neck in a bad spot, he's obviously got a dangerous choke game. At the same time, though, I do think, I think Bonfim has some holes in his defense standing. Like, we've seen him cracked a couple times regionally, and to date, he hasn't really. I guess Lizez is the same level of striker, or probably a better striker than Giles, but also that fight ended so fast, like we didn't even really get to see it play out at all. And now he's taking on Giles, and I kind of feel like Giles gets a lot of shit for making a lot of very dumb mistakes in the octagon, which I can't really argue that he hasn't made. But at the same time, like people talk about Trevin Giles like he's like just a barely hanging on to a UFC spot. And it's like, this is a guy who beat Brendan Allen. He beat Ryan Spann. He beat Roman Dolidze. He beat James Krause. Like his last 2 losses, which at the time he got shit on by the community for, were Dricus du Plessis, who's going to fight for a title soon, and Michael Morales, who's one of the best prospects in the sport. So it's like, I feel like some of his recent history has aged a lot better than some people want to give it credit for. In terms of the fight itself, yeah, I mean, look, I think Bonfim is the better striker, but I do think something that's kind of an interesting angle here is Bonfim's giving away 2 inches in reach. I think it's the first time in his career he's been at a reach disadvantage, and I don't think he has the best head movement ever. So like, I think there's going to be openings for Giles to land heavy on Bonfim as well. Like I'd expect Bonfim to be doing a bit more on the feet, but I do think Giles cracking him a bit here is possible. And grappling, as I mentioned, look, Bonfim does have a nasty front choke series, but I'm not sure he's got a lot else. And I feel like Giles is very likely the better wrestler here. Like Giles just fought a guy who I'd almost certainly say is a better wrestler in Preston Parsons, who he was largely able to grapple throughout that fight. We saw Giles a couple years back have a lot of grappling success against James Krause. I really wouldn't be surprised to see Giles be able to grind this guy out if the fight goes deep here. With that said, again, look, I agree with you guys. I think Bonfim's the more dangerous striker. I think he's a more talented fighter and he's a better athlete. So, like, to me, making him 60 to 65%, like up to the minus 170 to minus 185 range, I think is probably fine for Bonfim. But I think when you get past that, it's like we're talking about saying this guy is over 75% implied, and his best career wins are Trey Waters and a 1-minute guillotine against Munir Lizez, who's now taking on a 10-fight UFC veteran who's beaten some really good fighters in his career and has really only lost to quality fighters. To me, that feels extreme to me. Like, I think there's more finishing upside on the Bonfim side for sure, but I think Giles can finish here, and I think Giles has some decent grappling equity. So again, it's not the most passionate play ever. I think Bonfim's a good talent. I think he's likely the better fighter, but I mean, at plus 250, I was willing to take a 1-unit poke on Trevin. So we're going to ride him again till the wheels fall off, which might be soon, but hopefully not this week. Moving on here, we got Michael Chiesa taking on Kevin Holland. Current line, Holland minus 145. Come back on Chiesa plus 125. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
I like the under here. 2.5 rounds, minus 150. Have a unit and a half on that. I mean, I think in this type of a matchup, I think that captures pretty much all of Holland's win equity with Chiesa trying to wrestle him here. I think Holland could find a knockout on the feet. I think Holland could find a sub. Again, homage to the pod, club and sub. And I think if Chiesa obviously can get takedowns here. There's no doubt about it. And if he does have that dominant control time, he can find a sub. So I think under a minus 150 is good.
Yeah, I have a bit of Chiesa. It's kind of weird because, like, I'm a bit perturbed because I feel like at this point, Holland's lack of a game on his back, I would have thought is priced into the market, and it's not being priced in there, which makes me a bit nervous. And I will say, I did think Holland's defensive wrestling looked a bit improved for the brief amount of time we saw him fight Kyle Dawkins. So I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as I think some people do for Chiesa to get him down. But with that said, I do think Chiesa is better than Kyle Dawkins is, and he's obviously, a very, very physical welterweight here. And the one thing I got to give Chiesa some credit for on the feet, he's not a great striker, but he does a really excellent job of limiting exchanges. Like you look at the numbers in Chiesa's career, and there's not a lot of strikes get thrown in every fight. He's fought some high volume guys. He just does a very good job of kind of avoiding until he takes his time to get in. And to me, I still think Holland, until I see otherwise, if he gets put on his back, is a gigantic liability. It's something the market didn't pick up for a long, long time. And they might still not be. I'm not really sure. But, I still think this is a guy who can be controlled there. And I do think, Chiesa is a guy who we've seen get subbed before. So, I think you could make an argument for maybe Holland subbing him in a scramble here. But at the same time, I go back and I watch, the Neil Magny fight. And to me, Magny's a better grappler and a better defensive grappler than Kevin Holland is. And just seeing the way Chiesa eviscerated him, I do think he's going to be able to outgrapple Holland in this fight. My biggest concern, and Gugabe, shout out to him, pointed this out to me, and so did a couple other people, but it seems like Chiesa is not training nearly as much as he used to be. You know, he's doing a lot of stuff for LFA, for the UFC, which is a bit of a concern. Like, I don't know how much his head's in the game, but at the same time, it's like when you have a grappling edge like this at plus 125, it's hard to like not take, you know, a small swing at it. So I like the Chiesa side here. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have a passion for betting on Kevin Holland. I mean, I just lose money on this guy. I win money on this guy. I lose money on this guy. I yell at the screen when he doesn't go to the ground after knocking down Stephen Thompson. So yeah, no, I lose money on this guy and win money on this guy. But I definitely do think he's a very skilled fighter, and I feel like coming from 185 to 170 has been huge for him. He's just a size bully here. Chiesa's a size bully at 155, and he's going to be coming up. He still is very big for the weight. He's still big, not for the weight class, but still big. I just think, like you're saying, I mean, he's coming off of surgery. We have like unknowns in this guy training wise. He's like not. He's not like really responsible on the ground or going for takedowns, which is like so dumb against Holland, I think. And I think it's going to be a situation where Holland has these really long limbs and like tarantula legs where he's just going to be able to snatch a neck so easily. If he makes one bad takedown attempt, he could easily get Darstry, he could easily get guillotined. And I just feel like he makes these mistakes constantly. His style of jiu-jitsu is very unorthodox, and he goes for different things, and sometimes he'll fight for position, and other times he'll just completely leave and make mistakes and going for subs, and they're not always like textbook subs. It's like he's going for some freaky shit sometimes, and I think he makes mistakes. So that's why he gets subbed a lot, and I feel like that's going to be super live for Kevin in this fight. If as well as like if he stuffs takedown, Maiev was 2 for 5 on takedowns versus Holland at 170. Yeah. I mean, like, that to me is like a huge sign on like how he's improving in this. And like, I thought that was going to be one for one insta sub, insta ground and pound. And it was like, no, he actually made him work for a couple minutes, and then now he's down, and he gets up. Now he's down again. So like, I think that was a good enough sign for me that he can fight off some of the. I think the clinch is more of a problem in this fight. Like, I feel like if Michael's like, all right, I'm just going to clinch fuck you, and I'm going to put you on the cage, but I'm not going to necessarily take you down unless it's there. I think that's the problem, that Kevin will accept that position a lot. So I lean Kevin ITD and Kevin by sub kind of in this fight.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on, we got a fight that would have been a banger a couple years ago, a bit less exciting these days. We got Tony Ferguson taking on Bobby King Green. Bobby Green minus 400, Ferguson plus 300. I feel like everything that needs to be said has been said this week about, this fight. So instead of giving look, Bobby Green's minus 400. We all know Tony looked like shit against Nate. He's looked like shit for a while now. To me, he looks like an old man. I think we're all going to say that. He looks slow, rickety, easy to hit. So I'll make a case for the other side, not for betting Tony Ferguson. I will absolutely not make that case. But I'll just make a small case as to why you shouldn't be slamming Bobby Green into parlays. Look, some people got early DraftKings lines on Bobby at like minus 110, minus 125, minus 50. Those were amazing. I would have slammed those as well. Minus 400, though, I think you do have to keep in mind Bobby's 36 years old himself. Not a spring chicken here. He is relatively easy to leg kick because of his boxing stance. And I got to say, I laid the chalk on him against Jared Gordon. And prior to that fight ending, I did not feel very comfortable with that bet. I thought Bobby looked a bit slower than normal. And I thought he looked a bit shy about pulling the trigger, which is not something that I've ever said about Bobby Green before. So, yeah, I do think, there's enough concerns around Bobby's recent performance and combined with his age that, like, I wouldn't be clamoring to lay a minus 400. But with that said, Bobby should kick the shit out of Tony here. Tony just looks like, I'll let you guys answer this for yourselves. I don't think Tony Ferguson should be sanctioned to fight in MMA fights these days. Like, the dude was having documented mental issues a couple years ago. He had a DUI where he rolled a truck over a couple weeks ago, on top of which he has looked like a corpse. Like Nate Diaz, I bet Nate, but I bet him because I'm like, it's probably going to be a competitive volume fight. Nate's got some grappling upside. It wasn't, Nate's just going to walk forward with his hands down and punch him in the face whenever he wants and going to get nothing back in return. He just looked old. Even the Chandler fight, I bet him against Chandler. And I keep seeing people talking about, how he looked great in the Chandler fight. It's like, not really. He knocked Chandler down and hurt him bad in round 1. But other than that, like, singular moment and the minute of follow-up, go look at that round. The dude is he's moving different. He's moving slow. He's easier to hit. This is just, it's a guy who's just nowhere near his prime anymore. So, yeah, Bobby Green the Bobby Green who fought Drew Dober is going to cover this price pretty easily here. It's like, I think Bobby fucks him up. I think you could maybe make a case for under here, though I'm not sure I want to make it. But yeah, I think Bobby should handle him pretty easily. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I agree, man. The corpse of Tony Ferguson that should not be sanctioned anymore. This dude needs to be put down and taken to the woodshed and just old Yeller. Sorry. I have written down that he's 68 years old, actually. Officially, Tony is. It's the same thing. Like the Diaz tap was like that to me was very Derek Lewis-y and very Arlovsky-esque on just I don't want to do this anymore type mentality. I would just no fight whatsoever. Whereas I had a sub ticket on Charles Oliveira versus him, and he legit takes his game out of socket and he doesn't tap, and I lose that bet. So that's the different mentality. At least he was fighting then, and now I just don't think he's fighting anymore. So if you don't have that version of Tony Ferguson, then you don't have really anything to bet on. So that's his whole game is having that resilience and tenacity. Yeah, the only question is, do you think that Green purposely doesn't do anything to stay safe, or you just feel he finishes him? I lean that he finishes him. Just because he has so many paths. He could take him down. He could win every which way. He legit has every which way to win this fight. So Greens should be so much faster, so much quicker. Not a lot to talk about.
Agreed. What do you think, Lags?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't even know if there's much of an angle to talk about other than what you talked about with the under. The -3.5 isn't bad, a -160, but even then, yeah.
That's Green -3.5?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. I don't think that's crazy.
What I did see was kind of funny. The MMA Junkie just had a video interview with Tony, and Tony said 5 more and this is talking about retirement, right? He said 5 more fights and then a title, baby.
Dude, that's what I mean. The guy's he's just delusional. It's really he seems like a lost boy. A fight ago, if you guys recall, before that card fell apart, he was about to go up to 170 and fight the Leech, Li Jingliang. It just doesn't seem like
he would have got murdered there.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing anymore. Yeah. This is a man who is very likely needs the money and is getting a lot of money to show, and fans love him. You hate to see it because most MMA careers don't end like Robbie Lawler; they end like this. And I'm with Tim. Right. I think Bobby's going to take him out.
Honestly. You know the Steven Spielberg movie. I can't remember which one it was. If it's Poltergeist or if it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the guy insta dies and turns to a regular face and then goes oh, now he's 50, now he's 60, now he's 100. And the hair goes gray and he's
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah,
that's fucking Tony Ferguson to me. It's just over his last few fights. You're oh, he's the guy from Raiders. Oh shit, no, that's not good.
Dude, look at the videos. Look at pictures of him next to each other. Even from the Gaethje fight 3 years ago, he looks very aged. I'll tell you what, he looks a lot more than 2 years older than me. I will tell you that. The man has.
I was just going to ask you, John. Do you similar to what we were talking about with the Lewis fight? How much do you think? We were saying Lewis gets paid a lot for show. How much do you think Tony gets paid to show?
I'll tell you in a second.
That'd be interesting to see.
Sports Daily should have it. Here we go. Doing Google research during the podcast. That's the way. Here decent we go. Tony Ferguson career ratings. He's made a decent bag. The last fight they have documented, he made $150K to show for the Dariush fight. That's worth showing up for.
5 more fights. That's what he's telling us.
5 more fights in a title, baby.
His family is just telling him, just 5 more fights, Tony. Come on.
God, pray for Tony. Moving on.
He doesn't have a family that's helping him right now. It's not at all. No one in his box.
We got Wonder Boy taking on Michel Demoledor Pereira. Wonder Boy -160, comeback Pereira +140. What are your thoughts here, Tim?
Yeah, I like the Stephen Thompson side here. I think Pereira is a guy that I hear a lot of takes that he might wrestle here, or like proactively. He's not a guy that's like going to hold anybody down for any length of time at all. He's got 11 of 20 takedowns in his career in the UFC, so he can get them, but it's just he's not in a position where he's holding guys down. And this is a fight where everybody the knock on Thompson is like, all right, Bilal, and like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, Bilal is Bilal. He can do this for 17 rounds if you ask him to. And then it's just these guys that have different jiu-jitsu, they have different wrestling. I don't think that Pereira is that. I think it's going to be a predominantly striking. Is Pereira flashy enough, and does he throw enough volume to be able to do stuff? Like, maybe. But I just think that kickboxing, 15-minute kickboxing fight, I don't think I'm going to take a shot on Pereira unless I'm getting a wider line against Stephen Thompson. I think he's grappling. He needs big moments, and I kind of think Wonder Boy either wins a decision, unanimous, or maybe a close one. But I kind of lean unanimous decision.
Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I think similar to Tim as well. I'm going to be on the Wonder Boy side with the number coming down. Not super passionate take or anything, because obviously the age and Wonder Boy, this and that, is looking a little bit slower. But I just feel like I think he could make this look really easy and just and clown Pereira on the outside, make him miss with his footwork. Again, like we were talking about with Salvador, I feel like Pereira's a low IQ guy. He's throwing these Rabona kicks, throwing these like low IQ shit here and there. And I think a lot of that spinning shit and this and that, I think Wonder Boy's a smart fighter. So I don't know, minus 150, I'm fine with it. I think much better striker. And like Tim touched on, I don't think there's a ton of grappling upside for Pereira. I think he's going to gas out trying to.
Yeah, I have some early Pereira prices here. Not big, but I do think it's a competitive fight. And I'll say this, look, Stephen Thompson's one of my favorite fighters ever. Like, I love Wonder Boy, and look, he looked fine in his last fight, right? But I think
getting dropped, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't look great early in that fight, but he did come on hard as Holland started to slow. Here's the thing, though, and I think it's something that gets overlooked throughout Thompson's career. Thompson, he's had a couple of huge performances when the market's been against him. Now, obviously, it's not because the market's been against him, but like, if you actually look at them, the Holland fight, where he closed as like a plus 125 favorite, the Jeff Neal fight, and the Vicente Luque fight. Those are all recent years, big performances from Thompson. But all of those fights, if you go watch them, they all have the same thing in common. All three of those guys were really trying to come for him and really pressure him hard in those fights. And when you pressure Thompson, he really just lets his hands go. If you come in and try to chase him, he will up the output, and he's shown that, and he will throw serious volume. But when guys haven't pressured him and stand at distance, we've seen a very different Thompson. Like, you go to the Darren Till fight. That fight was 25 minutes long, mostly on the feet. Thompson landed 30 significant strikes. The two Woodley fights, same deal. He landed across 50 minutes with Tyron Woodley, 96 significant strikes. All three of those fights had the same common theme, where both of those guys, Thompson was just throwing a lot of feints out there, trying to bait them into a counter, and vice versa. And if you look at Pereira, he's had some high output fights, but Pereira does a lot of that too, kind of sitting on the outside and trying to make you commit first. And so I think about that, and I look at this fight, and I'm like, it kind of has staring contest written all over it to me, where these guys are kind of sitting back. If you go watch the most similar, people are going to really get angry at me for saying he's similar to Thompson. I know he's not a similar fighter, but the most similar archetype would be like a Chaos Williams, who, Chaos kind of similar, tries to bait a move out of you and then counter with a blitz. And those guys basically did a lot of staring at each other. Yeah, they landed less than 100 combined strikes in that fight. And I kind of think that's what's going to be at play here. Now, is Thompson the better kickboxer? Yes. I mean, no one's going to make a case that he's not. Thompson's a legendary kickboxer. But at the same time, in that kind of fight, like we saw with the Till fight, I thought Thompson won that fight. I thought he won the second Woodley fight. Margins are going to be really, really tiny in that kind of fight, where one or two big shots could swing around, or one takedown could swing around. I think Pereira's got all the grappling upside. In terms of finishing upside, I'd kind of edge him as well. It's not that long ago people were talking about Thompson's chin as having going into the Luque fight. Now, to be clear, I always thought that narrative was overrated. I think the guy just got caught with a couple huge shots from, Woodley and Till and Pettis. But at the same time, Thompson can be hurt. We've seen that. Like, I think Pereira of the two is a bit more likely to land one singular big strike. You know, if Thompson gets him up against the fence, he could let go at him. But so I have a guy who I think is the more likely of the two to hit takedowns. I think probably is a little bit more likely to hurt him. And that guy's 29 and has had a year off and been in extreme couture. And Thompson's 40 with another 6 months off. And we don't know what he's going to look like. Obviously, the cardio could be a factor, but if the fight goes similar to how I think it will, I think Pereira's looked fine when fights have been low volume. When they've been high volume is where you've really seen the gas tank wane. If this turns into a high volume fight with Pereira chasing Thompson, I think Thompson's going to fuck him up and maybe even finish him. But I don't know. Like, I have this gut feeling it's going to be a very close kind of tit for tat, you know, not a lot happening type of fight. And in that fight, it's like Pereira at like 40% implied with, you know, potentially a couple takedown upside and, you know, big moment upside. Plus he's 11 years younger. It's hard for me not to get on board there. I think it's a very close fight. I think Pereira, especially if you got him past plus 150, is the side here. But it wouldn't shock if Wonderboy blows him away. It won't shock me. Wonderboy is one of the best kickboxers ever. You know. So
yeah, the thing that you said, I agree. They're both counters, and I agree that this could be a staring contest for a while. Like that may lean to this split, like you're saying. But I do have a note on this that Pereira's age is somewhere between 29 and 36. It's not really 29. At the end, I think people in the chat were saying that I was inaccurate on my Tony being 68 years old. Look it up, man. He's 68 years old. So 68 for Tony.
He's 76.
Yeah, he's just turned since we last broke down the fight. So yeah, Pereira's 29 to 36 somewhere.
Fair enough. Moving on, we got Jan Blachowicz taking on Alex Pereira. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
Banger of a fight. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed this isn't a 5-round title fight. I kind of thought it was talked about that it was going to be. In terms of a betting take, though, I don't have a strong one. I think I'd have to lean on the Jan side just because of the grappling upside. And I feel like a lot of people are just saying, oh, there's a massive, the massive grappling upside for Jan isn't as big as people are saying the striking gap is much bigger than the grappling gap, and I couldn't disagree more. I feel like the grappling gap is way much bigger. I feel like Jan does compete on the feet, one of the best leg kick defense guys in the sport. I think it's a decent spot for Jan. I'm a little bit pondering the age, durability of Jan as well. I think he could get knocked out. I was looking at the under, but again, didn't get a good number at that either. So
yeah, the age concerns me, but I did bet Jan here for 1.5 units. That's really my biggest concern. Look,
yeah, same.
If they were putting on kickboxing gloves, and gonna go kickbox, I'd obviously favor Alex considerably. But that's not the sport that we're in. Alex has proved himself to be a very good MMA striker. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like one of the things it's like with these Poetan fights, people look at it and they only think about what's the likelihood the other guy's going to grapple. And they look at this fight and they say that, and they just assume Jan's fucked standing. And look, don't get me wrong. Him being 40 could mean that he's regressed to a point where this isn't true. But Blachowicz's striking is absurdly underrated. The guy outstruck Ankalaev on the feet. He was absolutely clowning Alexander Rakic on the feet before he got hurt. He outstruck Izzy on the feet. Outstruck him to the head, outstruck him to the body, outstruck him to the legs. The guy is a very, very good striker. As Lags touched on, one of Pereira's biggest tools has been that outside calf kick. And Jan checks almost every kick. On top of which, Jan's a ferocious kicker himself. And we did see Izzy was able to have a lot of success kicking Alex's legs. And Jan kicks way, way harder than Izzy does. So I think the striking is pretty competitive here. Then to compound things, it's like Pereira literally got knocked unconscious, viciously knocked out in April. This wasn't last September. It was in April. He got knocked out viciously. Now he's coming up to 205. 205 is the biggest split between any weight class. It's 20 pounds. 185 to 205. He's coming up to fight with the big boys here. He's going to be facing more power coming back at him. And let's be honest, both guys can get cracked, but Alex can get clipped in the pocket. We've seen it happen to him a bunch. Bruno Silva landed some howitzers on him when they fought. So, striking, I think it's close. Alex is obviously, even if you take away the low kicks, a very good striker. He could certainly outstrike Jan. That wouldn't be shocking at all. But I guess my point is, I think Jan has a real case here for being competitive on the feet and or knocking Alex out. And then you add in the fact that he's coming up in weight. He just got KO'd. Oh, and yeah, Jan's a black belt who has submitted much better grapplers than Alex Pereira is. It's like 2 takedowns is the decision. 1 takedown, if he gets a takedown with 3 minutes left in a round, there legitimately might be a 50% chance he subs Alex in that round. You go back and like I know a lot, and don't get me wrong, it's gone through my head as well. You know, a lot of the fears around Jan has been he doesn't grapple enough, and that is kind of true. But I mean, go through his last 8 fights. He's fought mostly outside of Izzy. He's fought very good grapplers. Like none of it. Like, was it going to benefit him to take down Cachoeira, Corey Anderson? Like who? Ankalaev? Which of these guys was he going to come out and out wrestle? None really is the answer outside of Izzy, who he did take down 3 times. So like, I think Jan is going to, I think he'll mix them in here and there. You know, maybe he might not go Marab and attempt 20 takedowns, but the point is we have a fight with a guy coming up in weight who got knocked out 3 months ago, whose calf kicks aren't going to be available here, who is fighting a guy with an absolutely enormous grappling edge, and the fight's near pick. I have to take the onside here. Tim, what do you think?
I think you guys checked every box that I had on my notes, so I think I might just let everybody know that this is a 3-round fight, and you know, that's about it. That's all I got for you guys. No, I think.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
That's all I got. No, I was, you know, in the Discord with you guys. I was, you know, initially my like pre-tape leans on this were, dude, Jan needs to grapple. I was thinking, I was on that boat of like, there's like a big, not a big gap, but like he's just would be stupid not to try to grapple this guy right now. Like Michailidis grappled this guy for a round. Like this is not, that's not like there's so far galactical differences between Andreas Michailidis and Jan Blachowicz. Like it's just, there just are. And
one is cut from the UFC. One's a former champion.
Right.
And that guy won a round. So
add what you said. I mean, I'll just piggyback on what you said with the Adesanya fight. I watched that back. It's like, you know, everybody was kind of saying like, oh yeah, he started to wrestle when he was losing and he was losing handily. He wasn't losing anything handily in that fight ever. Like there was never a moment where he was worried about like, oh, I'm getting my ass kicked, I need to grapple. It was like, no, I can also do this, and you have no answer if I do this. And then once he saw that he had no answer, and then he did it more. So I feel like you said, I mean, I think the grappling, the 3-minute concept with him on the ground, I 100% agree too. Like that, it's just going to be a question of when he gets him down. I am not a believer that I've been hearing people say this all week. Like I'm not a believer that just because Alex Pereira is like, you know, Glover's boy and he buys him a motorcycle that he's got like takedown defense now and sub defense. Like I'm not a believer. He's going to be fighting a black belt who's subbed Kopylov, who's subbed, you know, like Devin Clark, guys that are grapplers, like better grapplers than this dude. So yeah, he's got edge there. I also feel like he's got the I feel like he's got the durability edge too. I know that the power on Pereira is insane, but like I feel like you said, I mean, this is 3 to 4 months removed from him being not like kind of KO'd, him being like brutally KO'd. Like it's not like a ground and pound where like people are saying too, like, oh, it's not like you know, he's taking ground and pound shots. He's taking 15 ground and pound shots like Jan did versus Glover. It's like, that's not even close to as damaging as like the one shot this guy's sent to like another planet. Like those are way worse for you. Those instantly give you CTE. And it's like, that's the Antonio Brown factor. So yeah, I feel like Alex Pereira could be in the Antonio Brown phase of his life right now. You never know.
Wow.
Do we expect him to take the shorts off and run into the crowd halfway through the fight?
Oh man.
But yeah, let's go.
3-round fight. This is a 3-round fight. What did I say that again for everybody?
Nice.
Moving on, we got the main event. It's the rematch. Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. Poirier minus 145. Comeback on Gaethje plus 125. I almost bet Poirier early on and ultimately passed. It's kind of weird because like there's a part of me that thinks like I thought Poirier was fading a couple years ago when he fought Hooker. Like I was pretty sure we had seen his best days behind him. But then he had the 2 Conor fights and he won them both. It's like, oh, maybe not. What bothers me is how competitive the first fight was and how good Gaethje looked against Fiziev. Like I thought that was a career best performance from Gaethje against Fiziev, which really scares me because I do think Dustin is kind of declining. The reason I haven't bet Gaethje and what also almost scares me equally much is Gaethje's obviously improved quite a bit since the first fight. I think that improvement could in some ways potentially be his undoing. You know, he basically in that fight was willing to come and just fire calf kicks no matter how much damage he was taking. And Dustin could barely walk at the end of 3 rounds. Like if Dustin doesn't knock him out the first minute of round 4, he probably gets finished late in that fight. He looked like he was breaking pretty hard on the stool at the end of round 3. But the Gaethje we've seen recently, he's been kicking legs a lot less and he's been deciding to technically box a lot more. And that kind of concerns me because I still think, despite the fact that Poirier has been, you know, maybe slowing down, I think he's the better technical boxer here. I think both guys can be hurt. So I don't know. I don't feel strongly on a side. I guess I'd lean Poirier just because I think his game is more reliable to be implemented. What I do like, and it's a bit anti-community sentiment here, but I like the under 2.5. I know the first fight went into round 4, but man, like you look at these, I was texting Lags early in the week. You look at their last like 20 combined fights, and only 4 of these have cleared 2.5 rounds. And in those 4 fights that cleared 2.5 rounds, there were multiple wobbles in just about every single fight. Like these guys come out and throw down every fight. Like, or it might have been more than 4. It might have been more like 13 and 7. But either way,
you said 13 out of 17. I remember that.
It finished inside more often than not. And in the ones that didn't, both of these guys have been hurt and or hurt their opponents in the other ones. And well, so I look at...
Sorry, John, to cut you off real quick. 2 of those 4 were both of the Chandler fights when they fought each other.
Right, but both hurt Chandler bad. Chandler did get finished in one of them. I mean, you even look at like Poirier's war with Hooker. Poirier almost got... If there's 10 more seconds in round 2, Poirier gets stopped in that fight. And so all these people are like making the case for over 2.5 rounds here. And I'm like, why? You have 2 huge hitters, both of whom throw high volume, both of whom don't have great head strike defense, who are fighting for the BMF title and are going to come out here and absolutely throw down. We've seen them fight once, and it was an absolute fucking war. Just because it didn't finish doesn't mean that it goes over to, or just because it didn't finish under 2.5 doesn't mean it goes over 2.5 at a high clip. You know, those are basically the recipes you'd look for in an under 2.5 rounds here. Both can hurt each other and both can finish here. Like I said, the data is there. I don't see any reason this should be like if these guys were fighting a 3-round fight, I feel like the under would be minus money. Gaethje versus Chandler, the under 2.5 was minus 350. Like it was a huge minus number for Poirier versus Chandler too. And now they're fighting each other, and everyone's like, well, they went to the 4th round the first time. It must mean it's going to go back there again. I don't think so. We're going to get a high volume fight with 2 guys in their mid-30s who are probably at the back end of their careers, who both hit very hard and are going to punch each other in the face a lot. I like the under 2.5 here. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, if I was on, like, I'm on that island with you, I feel like it's going to be unfinished, like probably in the first 3 rounds. I don't know about under 2.5, but I think like maybe even the end of round 3. Like I just feel like the same thing. Like the Fiziev fight, it's the same thing now. You're buying basically as high as you can on Justin, and he had an amazing performance. But like, I don't know. I feel like the kicks were always the strength, and the kicks were always the thing that I would be worried about with Fiziev, and I wouldn't be as worried about his boxing, where the boxing on Poirier is just way, way, way better. And I feel like that's the difference. And that's where you're saying like the same thing. Like, I feel like the hands where this gets to be, you know, really interesting is, you know, maybe the mindset on the guys that are on the over isn't also that they're thinking like it's going to guarantee both be these guys being durable and they're going firefight. That I think that maybe they're thinking that this fight is nothing like the last fight, and that there's sometimes you see that, and you'll see that the you know combinations, the duels and the sequels of fights and trilogies of fights that they're never the same thing. So if that's the case, though, that would be a really weird Poirier and Gaethje fight. Like there's iterations of other fights where guys are fighting where you see like, okay, there's different versions of their fights in general, but there's never like non-war. There's never a non-war, you know, like with these guys in fights. So like you're saying, I kind of think that both these guys go after each other. They know each other's games. They know what they like to do. Most likely someone gets their game off. And I favor the resiliency, and I favor they're both, don't get me wrong, they're both extremely resilient and they're both extremely durable, but I feel like the durability and resiliency on Poirier is just a little bit better. And I feel like the boxing and the technicality of the boxing is a little bit better. So, yeah, I would lean Poirier, and I would think probably in the first 3 rounds, but wouldn't be surprised if Gaethje got him out in the first 3 rounds either.
Lags, how about you?
I'm probably going to play Poirier at -140, honestly. I think he's a much better boxer, and I think the durability edge is actually pretty big. And similar to what you touched on, John, about the just aggro Gaethje, that's a completely undoing to his style. Like if he's just going to go in there and box with Dustin, I think Dustin cleanly outboxes him. So, yeah.
Yeah, and something else I think is interesting. Tim mentioned the Fiziev fight, and like people don't really like Fiziev is fairly low volume for a kickboxer. Like he doesn't throw to the head much. Like Dustin comes out biting the mouthpiece from minute 1, almost every single fight. I don't think there's going to be much feeling out here, you know.
No.
So.
No, I feel like it's the over is cashing. It's one of those like minus EV cashes. Like it's an absolute war, bloodbath. Like, all right, a cash, but like, you feel good about it? Like,
never a doubt. Never a doubt.
Yeah, never a doubt. Yeah.
The three knockdowns and both guys with an eye shut and it goes over.
Cashed it, -120 though.
Yes.
But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Want to shout out Tim. Tim, thanks for coming out. You want to shout out Lambo Plays? Tim does the best show, one of the best shows in the community. Shout it out.
Yeah, Narco Cop has a show on Fridays. Co-host it with him. Lambo Plays podcast. We give out +300 prop plays or higher. Been doing really well the last couple of years with him. It's just a blast show. I love attacking props. That's definitely more my angle than betting money lines and things like that. I'm learning a lot from you guys on how to read the market and bet money lines a little bit better, but props have always been where I kind of like to attack. So I do that. And then I do a live show with Sean Orr on Twitter, and then join Narco on the live spaces. So appreciate you guys having me on again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tim. Guys, follow Tim on Twitter at Timothy_Troiano. Again, guys, I didn't say it at the beginning. I forgot because I was so excited that Tim was on with us. But if you like the show, drop a like, subscribe, please share it, do all that good shit. We'd really love it. Yeah, guys, I hope you win this weekend. Good luck to everybody. You can find me on Twitter, John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags. Good luck on your bets this weekend. We'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Good night, everybody.